to my YouTube channel. So today guys, we are officially on week 2 of the Seamless Study Guide, day 1 of week 2. As I've said in previous videos, if you haven't watched my other previous videos, go and watch them first because it will help you, get the flow with this one and understand better because we are doing a series. By the way guys, if you can hear any noises, my son running around upstairs, so please ignore that. So on week 2, she writes out a little introduction for week 2, and then she does a little homework session. So you review week 1 and do a little session. These are really good to go through and it helps you just reflect and go over your notes that you've done. If you've got the book already, go ahead and do this. If you haven't got the book, don't worry, you can just skip this, or go and order the book now and you can come back to this. So I'll just read the start of week 2 and then we'll skip the homework book and get on to day 1. So week 2, the patriarchs. Good for you. You've been on a tour of prehistory, from the creation of the universe through the Tower of Babel, and you can remember them with pictures. So if you guys watched my first video, you remember I said that she adds pictures throughout the book and also little symbols at the bottom of the book to help you as you're going through the study. So she says, you can remember them with pictures, the globe for creation, the male, female symbol for the creation of the first humans, the snake brings to mind the events and the effects of the fall, the boat for Noah and the tower for Babel, and you've got a grip on the whole time period. Ready for a new week? Let's get started. We're going to look at the time Bible folks call the period of the patriarchs, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. In the Bible, we're talking Genesis 12 through the end of the book, so all the way to Genesis 50. We'll not only find out what a patriarch is, we'll get to know them personally, and once again we'll have a set of pictures as memory aid. This week we'll begin with a megaphone because God called a man named Abram to begin with the redemptive process. We'll see a name tag because God changed Abram's name to Abraham and his grandson Jacob's name to Israel. Hey, doesn't that name ring a bell? Stick with us and we'll see how it all fits. Next we see a number 12. 12 sons of that Israel guy. And 12 tribes of Israel. Do we see a pattern here? A money bag. Is somebody going to make profit? Well, only in a manner of speaking. The money bag reminds us of a bunch of brothers who sold their siblings. Haven't we all at least thought about that one at one time or another? The final icon that the pictures I've studied this week is some pyramids. Somebody's going to go into Egypt, I do believe. So she's referring to the little symbols at the bottom. I'm going to add it on this video so you guys can see. So let's skip to day 1 of week 2. So Abram and the covenant. You've made it through the first week. Congratulations. Now fasten your seatbelt. God has a thrill ride for us this week. God scattered the nations after the Tower of Babel. So now we have people all over the place in a town called Your Lives a Man Named Terror. Don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's what it was called. So of whom was Terah a descendant? Genesis chapter 11 verse 10. Guys, I hope you've got your Bibles as well today. So as you guys might have remembered from the previous video, we were studying the book of Job, which was all the way in the middle of the Bible, and now we're flicking all the way back to Genesis, which is at the beginning. So as I mentioned in the previous video, as Angie has said, the Bible is not in complete order. It's all over the place, so which is something I've just recently learned. So Genesis chapter 11 verse 10. So this is the account of Shem's family line. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. Arphaxad. That is an interesting name. So Angie goes on to say, we don't know much about Noah's son Shem, but we learn a little bit in one story in Genesis chapter 9, verse 18 to 27. You guys can go ahead and read that and pause this video if you like, or read it after. So evidently, Noah got drunk and ended up naked in his tent. I'm reporting the facts here, people, she says in brackets. One of his sons, Ham, saw him naked and then told his brothers what was going on. What did they do in Genesis chapter 9, verse 23? So, verse 23, but Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders, and then they walked in backwards and covered their father's naked body. Their faces was turned the other way so they would not see their father naked. So they had a lot of respect for their father. So Angie says, well done boys, cover your drunk and naked father and show him some respect. Shem was one of the good kids and he got his dad's blessing after this incident and several generations later. Terah was born in his family line. Read Genesis chapter 11 verse 31 and record the following. So where did they start? Where did they plan to end up? And where did they actually end up? I'll let you guys go through that and I'll skip it in this video. So Angie says, look at the map on page 38 to get a sense of their journey. So she adds a map here on page 38, which I'll add on the video for you guys. So Terah dies in Haran, but his son Abram and Abram's wife, Sarai, but I thought it was Sarah, so maybe I've got that wrong. Sarai are about to get a pivotal assignment from God. If this were a movie, the soundtrack music would crescendo right here. We're about to meet a guy God will use more than almost anyone else in the history of the world. The call of Abram. Genesis 12 is one of the most important chapters in the entire Bible. If you miss what's happening in these few paragraphs, you can't fully understand the rest of the Bible. Intense, right? But also true. I bet you know his name, and you might even know a clever song or two about his sons. His name will change to Abraham, but at this point it's still Abram. But it's so much more than that. Here in a short account of God's words to Abram, we see the first stitch in the seamless story of God's love for a chosen group of people. Go ahead and read Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. So, the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country and your people and your father's household to the land I will show you. So she asks, who is speaking to Abram? This is Andrew, by the way. Where and whom does he tell Abram to leave, and where does he tell Abram he will end up? Which we just read in that verse. Perfect. Leave everything and go somewhere that I'm not exactly going to specify right this second. Dear control freak, it's time to go night-night for a little bit. But, this is what she says. What does verse 2 tell us what will happen? And then she's added a little bit here again where you can fill in the gaps of verse 2. So, verse 2. I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you and I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. Can you imagine like God telling you this? You're going to be like, oh my God. But then he's like giving you a taster of what's to come, but you don't know exactly what's to come and you don't know exactly where you're going. So this might make you question God, like, God really, like, this is when God's really testing your faith here, because I know that happens sometimes with me, like where God's like, he's told me something, or shared something with me about, you know, what's gonna happen, and then I start doubting because, you know, I haven't got it all planned out, or like I don't know all the specifics of it, and I'm like, was that even God that was talking to me? Is God really gonna do this? Like, and you know, that's why Angie says as well, like control freak, like, but because it's human nature to want to have things planned out, to want to know your future, want to know where you're going. So that's quite natural, and I've got 2 points like that as well. But even in my point in my life right now, is a time that God's really wanting me to trust him. And when I mean really, I mean really, really wanting me to trust him. And it has been difficult, I can't lie, but you know, we just got to keep trusting God, and I keep praying that he helps me to continue trusting him. But anyway, let's get back to the book. Sorry guys. So, okay, so you fill in the gaps if you've got the book. And then she goes on to say, we're going to see this a lot in the coming weeks. And I want you to start paying attention to these short but awesome sentences. Over and over, you're going to see a theme of obedience by God's finest men and women. And a majority of the time, it's not because they have all the details. It's because they trust God. Like, oh, God loves when you trust him. Like, when you put your whole trust in him, God will reward you. And God will bless you. I don't know about you, but I could stand a few more she went moments in my own life. She then says, in verse 5, we see where Abram is headed. Where is it? So in verse 5, he took his wife Sarai, if I said that right, and his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So this is where God was taking him. So Angie says, Pops died in Haran, but Abram gets to Canaan. Then God tells him a little something that will only shape the rest of the Bible and the history. What does God tell Abram he's going to do in verse 7? Let's check it out. So then in verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. And she goes on to say, I mean, are you freaking out? No? I know. Hang on, we'll get there. In our efforts to become friends with the maps, I want you to do a little project. Read Genesis 12, verse 4 to 9 again, and trace over the route of Abram on the map below. I just want you to feel some ownership about all this. And I think that physically drawing it out will help. Start where Abram does and then trace his path. In case you're wondering, the area pictured in the map below is modern day Egypt on the south, and Iraq on the east, and Israel in the middle. I'll add the picture up here, guys. So go and read Genesis chapter 12, verse 4 to 9. Go in either, if you've got the book, great, because then you can just use the book and do it. And look at it, or if not, just pause the video and look at the map on this video that I'm going to add. So Angie goes on to say, when I was in 6th grade, we had a colour map of the United States, I think Angie's from the US, with coloured pencils, including all the major rivers and mountains. I despise geography, but I'd do anything for an excuse to colour code things. In fact, I could live at Staples and be a very happy girl. I dare say Noah wouldn't have bothered getting hammered if he had simply had access to some highlighters and a pack of multi-size sticky notes. I don't know if that's true. She goes, I digress. Abraham, I keep saying Abraham, it's Abram first. Abram and his family don't hang out long. What's going on in verse 10? So, verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. So Angie says, because of this, and she puts in brackets, again, look at the map so you have a reference point. Abram briefly moves his family to Egypt, but he makes the mistake of lying to the ruler in Egypt called Pharaoh. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about Pharaoh in Egypt. So Abram told Pharaoh that his wife Sarai is just his sister. Why, you ask? I wondered this, like, why would he do that? So because she was evidently pretty hot lady, and he thought they would kill him to have a shot with her, and Abram didn't want to die, so he thought lying would be better. I mean, that's not always it's not the good way to go to lie, like. So, turns out pretending your wife is your sister is a bad idea. It is. The Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt, falls in love with hottie Sarai and gets a tad annoyed when he realises her brother is actually her spouse. He sends them out of Egypt and they return to Canaan. I don't know exactly what the soundtrack plays when we've lied about this sort of thing, but whatever that is, it's playing. For the record, I will say this, Abram wasn't totally lying. What does Genesis chapter 20 verse 12 reveal? So Genesis chapter 20 verse 12 states, "Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife." If you guys watched I think it was the first video, I said that they had to, it seems really creepy now because this would never happen now, but back then they had to sleep with each other's brothers, sisters, you know, because how would they replenish the earth? How would they multiply? They had to sleep with each other and, you know, have kids. So although that seems really creepy now, because if that happened now, we'd be like, that is incest, that is disgusting, but they didn't have a choice back then. So technically, Abram wasn't really lying. So Angie says, "Don't you feel better now?" Phew. I mean, close call on the lying thing. This is much better. Ew. Once they get back to Canaan, the land can't sustain both Abram and his nephew Lot. They decide to split up, and Abram tells Lot to choose the land he wants. Abram will take whatever's left. Lot makes a bad decision and points to the valley region near the Dead Sea because he thinks it will be the most fertile. Unfortunately, it's not only geographically low, but also morally low. In a short amount of time, God will destroy Sodom because of its wickedness. Do you know the story of Lot? It's not the easiest one to summarize for a kid's Bible, I'll tell you that much. Real quickly, jump to Genesis chapter 19, 23 to verse 26. What does Lot's wife do and what happens as a result? So, verse 23. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and all the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt. So back to the study guide. The next part isn't any better. His daughters get him drunk and sleep with him. Wow. I wanted to sugarcoat that, but facts are facts. The truth is, we will understand stories we read about later if we learn this stuff. So then she's put a little bit here that you can fill in the gaps as well. Again, guys, if you've got the book, go ahead and fill those out. So mum is salt and dad is the father of their kids. It might not be the best year even for the girls. We'll hear of these families again, but just know that this is where they got their start. So God's covenant with Abram. Go back to Genesis 15 where God establishes his covenant with Abram. A covenant is a promise, and that's what this is. But it's so much more. I'll let you guys go ahead and read Genesis 15. I know this is still unfolding, but Abram will become the father of the chosen people of God. They're special to him, and most of the Bible will revolve around them. So pay attention. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, what does God tell Abram will happen? Let's quickly look at verse 5. He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Wow. So Angie says, well, that's fantastic, but also unlikely because Abram has no children. Not to mention, he's an old man. His wife, Sarah, is well past her childbearing years. This seems like an impossible prediction. Yet, God is abundantly clear, you will have children. So I think they were around like 90 something or 100 and something. So imagine being told and you're like 100 and something that you're gonna have children. You're gonna be like, what? No, like, that's impossible. But trust me, anything is possible with God. So if God's told you that this is gonna happen, it's gonna happen. Look at the actual process that God goes through to make this promise to Abram in chapter 15. Go ahead and read the chapter. Don't cringe, it's not long. So go ahead and read Genesis chapter 15. When two people were in agreement about a covenant, they would take part in a ritual. The Hebrew word for covenant is barath, and to enter it, the two parties would divide a sacrifice. The translation, they would kill animals, cut them in half, and walk a figure-8 pattern together between the bodies while reciting the conditions of the covenant. Can you imagine having to do that now? Like, that's scary. But this time, something was a little different, because after all, it's God we're talking about, not just two people. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, what do we learn about Abram's condition during this process? As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Wow. So Angie goes on to say, exactly, Abram was not even awake during the process. That means God made the covenant with Abram. God is obligated to uphold his end of the promise. It was not a mutual agreement. God takes all the responsibility. Only he can keep his promise. Basically, God is saying, no matter what, my promise stands. Abram didn't need to be a part of it, because God's commitment to Abram was what mattered. Are you wondering why it's so important that God cut covenant with Abram? Are you thinking, she's really Bella boring this one little story? If you are, that makes me happy, because it means you are well on your way to realising that in this moment, God made a promise and he will keep for all this time, and one that affects our lives today. This moment, this spectacular moment where God made a commitment to Abram, believe me when I say this, it explains stories you may very well watch on the news tonight. The legacy that began on a mountain between an imperfect man and a perfect God. Well, its repercussions spread into the crevices of our lives, and a faith even as I write these words. Yes, it's that important. As we close for today, just know this. You've opened the book of promise, and you're on your way to learning how to understand the rest of it. In this lesson, we met Abram, the man God would use to shape his story forever. Violinists, take a breath, but not for long, because we're going to need you again in a minute. Thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as I've said in previous videos, I personally enjoy when people read to me. It helps me understand better, so I hope it's done the same for you. Hey, this is not all, it's not made for everyone, so but I hope those of you who have watched it have enjoyed it and have taken something from it. I pray God speaks to you through these videos. I pray he touches your heart, and I pray you genuinely see the heart of God in all of this, and the one seamless story, as Angie has stated, his love for us, and that's what is important. Anyway guys, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. But yeah, bye guys.